Welcome to Muskegon Rising, a community service project of the Muskegon Rotary Club. Our purpose is to create lasting positive change. We've been doing that here since 1916. So, let's get started.
Hello, I'm your host, Aaron Mikey, for today's podcast, Muskegon Rising. Today I'm here with Brad Hastings from the Disability Network, West Michigan. Welcome, Brad.
Well, thanks for having me.
So excited to have you here to learn something that I literally knew nothing about until last week.
Right.
So you can thank Myra Dutton for putting this together, and I know you're partnered with her and Jill Bontice on this project.
Yeah, so we have a number of different disability organizations in the community that are working together on this. So yeah, Pioneer Resources, HGA Services, the MAISD's Transition Services, as well as Michigan Rehabilitation Services, and a couple of others too, but kind of a conglomerate of disability service organizations.
Awesome. So let's talk about what you're doing in a couple of weeks here. And it's a film called Crip Camp. I know nothing about it, so let's tell our listeners about it because they probably haven't heard about it either.
Yeah, so Crip Camp is a Netflix film produced by Jim Lebrecht and Nancy Newnham, and it is a film that chronicles a camp experience of kids with disabilities in the 1960s and 70s. It's called Camp Jeanette. It was in upstate New York, I believe. And so the first part of the film talks about their experience at camp, talks about how liberating it was to just be treated like people. And then the second half transitions into talking about the disability civil rights movement. So there will be, there's Judy Heumann. They have shots with Ed Roberts, who's kind of the father of the independent living movement. So some of these prominent disability rights advocates from the early 60s and 70s movement are kind of, there's a bunch of footage that talks about 504 sit-ins and disability advocacy and how that eventually leads to the passage of the ADA in 1990. So a bunch of really rich civil rights activism history there. And yeah, it's a really great film. So we're excited about it.
What inspired the decision to do this for our community? And why don't you tell us when the filming is actually going to happen after you answer that question too?
Yeah, so the inspiration was just we wanted to make sure that disability was being included as we talk about making our community inclusive for everybody, making sure that disability is recognized as a normal, natural part of human diversity, and talking about ways that we can make sure that our community is aware of these issues, the issues that are still impacting people with disabilities today, and try and start a conversation about what we can do to move forward. And the screening of the film is going to be April 15th at 5:30. We're going to do kind of an opening reception. We're going to have hors d'oeuvres and nonprofit exhibitors in the lobby of the Frauenthal. And then at 6:30, we'll start the film. And then after the film, we're going to do kind of a disability panel discussion that will include a few members of the local disability community. And we'll just kind of talk about their lived experience and, yeah, try to create a positive conversation.
And bring a lot of knowledge to a topic that I don't think many people are truly aware of through this type of medium.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me, you think 1990, it took that long for a law to be formed to provide equal rights for those with disabilities. That's truly amazing to me that it took that long.
Yeah, in 1973, they passed the Rehabilitation Act, which made sure that any federally funded programming would be accessible to people with disabilities. They cover that pretty extensively in the film. But yeah, I mean, up until 1990, it was really only the federal government that guaranteed civil rights to people with disabilities. And so, yeah, and even now, we're approaching the 35th anniversary this year of the ADA, and there's still a lot of places in our community that are not accessible.
So you, Myra, Jill, are really working on this from your organizational perspective. Why do you think it's so relevant at this point in time?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason is just, what I just mentioned. We've had a civil rights law for people with disabilities in place for 35 years. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that people are adhering to that law. that all of our public spaces are accessible. It's also, as we move into, more advanced technologies and things like that, accessible technology is becoming a huge issue. And I really think disability civil rights is it's still a growing, important civil rights issue, particularly as we move into more advanced technology issues.
Great. So the movie, it really talks about a pivotal moment in the disability rights movement altogether. What are some of the key takeaways that you hope the audience will reflect on?
A couple of things that I think people will take away is just that, people with disabilities are people like everybody else. They want to do the same things that people without disabilities want to do. They want to work. They want to go out in the world and go to entertaining things. They want to gather at social things. And they just want the world to be constructed in a way that that fits their needs and fits everybody's needs, right? I mean, that's the other thing I hope that people take away is that accessibility is good for everyone. When you talk about things like ramps and automatic doors, I mean, they're not only good for people using walkers and wheelchairs, but they're also good for people who are carrying bags of groceries or pushing strollers or anything like that. These are things that make all of our lives easier and not just for people with disabilities.
Making things more accessible does not take away from others.
Exactly.
That's great. You mentioned work, and I know I didn't prep you with this question, but I can't think of an employer in Muskegon County that doesn't need employees. Everyone I talk to needs employees. How can making your workplace more accessible lead to better opportunities for employees?
Yeah, so, and actually, I think that this is another thing that makes this film and discussion so important right now. I mean, across the country, employers are talking about worker shortages. They can't find enough qualified people to do the things that they need done in their places of employment. And really, I mean, we know from the work that we do that people with disabilities are kind of an untapped market when it comes to employment because there's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation about what it takes to employ someone with a disability. A lot of people think accommodations are going to be heavily, very costly, and oftentimes they don't cost anything. So, there's just a lot of, I think the timing is right for people to see this film and to have a conversation about how can we tap into a population of people whose unemployment rate is almost double that of people without disabilities, despite the fact that they want to work at the same rates.
And how large is this population of people?
So the most recent estimate I saw from the CDC is that 1 in 4 adults in the United States has some type of disability. It's worth pointing out that not all disabilities are something that people can see. You can't just immediately tell that someone has a disability by looking at them all of the time. There are mental health conditions, chronic illnesses, and, it's just a wide umbrella of things that can impact people's daily living experience and life. And, there's any number of reasons why somebody might need a specific accommodation for work or things of that nature. So,
hundreds of millions of people, potentially over 100 million people in the United States that are just need some type of accommodation to make them more successful.
Right.
That's an amazing statistic. So the movie also illustrates the importance of individual stories in driving social change. How do you think that will help people make it real in Muskegon County?
Yeah, I think, particularly when it comes to disability stories, I mean, I think people tend to be touched when they hear about individual experiences. And, one of the things I like to say when we are out in the community talking about this stuff is, sometimes people hear these things and they think, oh, well, I don't have a disability. Nobody I really know does. These things, why do they impact me? And what we like to tell people is, well, there are three ways that you could become a person with a disability. And that's, the first is that you could be born with one. The second is that it could happen to you because you have some sort of catastrophic illness or accident. And then you're disabled afterwards. Or if you're lucky and you live a long time, you're more than likely going to acquire some as you get older, So these are issues that are going to impact us at some point in our life. And, the other thing, people say, well, I don't really know anyone who's, somebody who has a disability. You just might not know that they do. Yeah.
That's really amazing. It's so touching to see these types of personal stories. And I'll quote a past Muskegon Rotarian, Dr. John Severson, who is the superintendent of the ISD. To really move people, you have to pull on their heartstrings. And so it sounds like this movie and the discussion that will be before and after will truly pull on people's heartstrings to make them realize that so many people have some type of disability that we need to be better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it will definitely pull on some heartstrings, and we hope that, it inspires some empathy and some action as well. So,
speaking of action, President Obama calls Crip Camp a call to action. What specific actions do you hope that the attendees will seek after or try to move towards after viewing this film?
Yeah, honestly, one of the biggest things that we think can make a positive difference is just keeping the conversation moving forward. Watching this film, we hope inspires people to continue talking and to talk to their friends about these issues, but also to think about, ways that they can engage in their community. How can they engage with their employer to make sure that their workplace is accessible, not only for potential new employees, but for existing employees and also for customers. How can we make sure that our community is a place where everybody feels welcome and has the opportunity to participate? Absolutely.
There's going to be a panel discussion afterwards.
Yeah.
Who are the attendees at that panel discussion?
Yeah, so a couple of our staff have volunteered to be panelists, and I know a couple of people who are engaged with Pioneer Resources are agreeing to participate as well. These will all be local members of the disability community, all people who have lived with disabilities, for most of their lives, and have a lot of really important perspective to offer to this discussion. So,
I always love panel discussions. So the conversation will be will it just be a presentation, or will the audience have an opportunity to ask some questions and get really specific about how they can maybe help at their place of business or at their home to make this movement really successful?
Yeah, so I think we're planning to do kind of a hybrid of both. So I've got myself looped into being the facilitator of the discussion and the MC for the night. So yeah, we're going to try to do both. We're going to try to ask some questions of the panelists to just ask about their experience and what are their suggestions on how people can be involved and be of support. Talk a little bit about their lived experiences. What are their stories? But then, also allow the opportunity for some folks in the audience to ask some questions as well.
That's great. Crip Camp takes place at a summer camp. How does that lend itself to telling this message about accessibility?
Yeah, in the film, you'll notice that when the campers are talking about their experience there, they talk about how liberating it is just to be in a place where they're valued as a whole person. People don't ask them, "Oh, are you sick?" because they're using a wheelchair, or really, try to prevent them from doing things. I think a lot of them share their experiences of having parents who are overprotective. So this is a place where they can just be teenagers and do what they need to do or want to do. They have camp counselors there and personal attendants that are kind of baked into the whole program that just allow them to engage with other kids their age and do the things that they want to do, to play games, to swim in the pool, to play guitar and sing,
Those of us that don't have a disability, I'll speak for myself, don't truly appreciate some of the barriers that might be there until you actually see it. I had an opportunity, I know you're meeting and you're going to come in and talk to a class at the college for our OTA, Occupational Therapy Assistant Program. Don't want to use those acronyms. I was really touched. We partnered with the Adventure Sports Park out at the Muskegon State Park, and that same group went out and they had an accessibility day. What an amazing experience to see the different adaptive devices, ice skating, cross-country skiing, doing the luge. They do zip lining out there, accessible zip lining in the summer. It's amazing. Can you talk about that? And I'm sure you've been out there. You've met with Bill and his team. How does that play into what this looks like?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I'm really passionate about accessible recreation, going out to the store or going to, an office or having to do things in your work life or whatever. Those are things that everybody needs to be able to do. But the things that make life really worth living are recreation opportunities, right? So things to go out that are fun to do. I can't speak highly enough of the whole team at the Muskegon Luge and Adventure Park, Jim Rudisil and Dan Bonner and Bill Bailey and all those folks. They really have gone above and beyond to make everything they do there available to people with disabilities. And we had our whole staff out there for a retreat. And yeah, they've got a Hoyer lift to get wheelchair users up to the zip line. They had one of our staff who's completely blind doing archery and hitting targets. One of our other staff who's a wheelchair user was able to do the rock wall with a special kind of harness and ascending thing. He ended up, 45 feet off the ground. And yeah, I mean, being out there with folks who typically have all sorts of barriers as to why they wouldn't be able to participate in something like that. I mean, it's really powerful to see them to just be able to engage in these activities and to be supported in that. So
absolutely, you work to pay the bills, and the recreation really is filling your life, and that is so important to recognize. And that's why I wanted to bring that up, because it is. We want to make sure that everything is accessible so everybody can enjoy their full life.
Right.
So we talked about the Adventure Sports Park. What are some other resources or local organizations that support individuals with disabilities and promote inclusion?
Yeah, so obviously I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Disability Network West Michigan here. We're a local center for independent living, which is something they talk briefly about in the film as well. So we're created by and for individuals with disabilities. At least 51% of our staff and 51% of our board of directors are required to be people with disabilities. So that ensures that all of our programming is done at the direction of people with disabilities, so that lived experience is always built into everything that we do. If you have a disability-related need or are looking for resources, if we can't provide those, we hope to be able to refer you to somebody who can. So we're always a great first step to call. Another Pioneer Resources does a lot of good work on working with individuals who are looking for employment, getting people to different medical appointments, social activities, those sorts of things. Yeah, and so I mean, there's a lot of different resources that are available in the community, but I would say, Disability Network, we try to stay aware of all of them. And if people call us and they're looking for some sort of disability related thing, we hope that we can connect them to it.
That's great. So you really can help. You can help them, but you can also guide them to places where you might not be able to fulfill what they need.
Yeah. And I'll also say, so our services kind of fall into two different buckets. So the first bucket is that we work with people with disabilities on their goals. Whatever they want to achieve, we try and support them in making sure that they're able to achieve those goals, making sure that they have the resources to accomplish it, making sure that they have the knowledge, making sure that they have the skills, connecting them to any sort of programming that might be necessary. And then the second bucket of our programs is that we work within our communities to make them more accessible and to remove barriers for people with disabilities. So we do a lot of accessibility evaluations, technical assistance around the ADA, and community education programming about accessibility and just disability-related issues in general.
Wonderful. We've talked a lot about it, but what do you and your partners really think that you want the impact of this film and the discussion afterwards to be on our community?
Yeah, I mean, really, the hope is that this film inspires people to want to dig in more and to learn more about how can we make our communities accessible? What does that actually mean? How can we take this discussion and implement it into a practice? And what are the projects that can make our community more accessible? How can we promote these ideas to the members of our business community, to our local governments? How can we make sure that the conversation doesn't end there, right? How can we promote these ideas and make sure that this is a bigger discussion in our community, and everything that we do in Muskegon, how can we make it accessible to everybody?
Is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything you haven't said that you want our viewers to know? The Frohenthal, of course, it's a huge facility. So let's fill that place. Let's make sure everybody becomes more aware of how we can be a more accessible community. Lots of seats in there, but anything else that you'd like to leave our viewers with, our listeners with? I
guess the last thing I'll say is that if people are looking for more information, we will have a press release going out about this soon. But we do have an event up on Disability Network's website, which is disabilitynetworkwm.org. They can go to our event calendar. It's on April 15th. If they click it up, they can they can see the description. The movie trailer is there, and they'll also be able to RSVP. The RSVP asks people if they need any accommodations. So, if people need ASL interpretations or assisted listening devices or anything like that, they can request those when they RSVP, and we can make sure that we have those available so that the event is accessible to everyone.
Great. Brad, thank you so much for participating today. This is just awesome information that we all need to consider. I really appreciate the work that you're doing in our community to make it better and more accessible for all.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Muskegon Rising. We really appreciate your patronage. For more information, please visit muskegonrotary.org. And if you think somebody in our community is doing something awesome, please email us at muskegonrising@muskegonrotary.org.